Welcome to Roguecast, the official podcast of Rogues Gallery and Round Rock, where we talk about games, comics, and other stuff on our pop cultural radar. I'm Randy.
This is Dave. One of y'all has to respond now.
I am Nick.
And with us today, for the first time, we have brought in one of our staffers, Tila.
Hi.
And she's going to be bringing a little class to the joint, as a little bit later we're going to be talking about books.
Yes.
Right.
Books without pictures, people.
They exist.
I don't believe you.
No.
They exist.
No.
We'll question you, and we'll get to the bottom of this.
But
These books.
These books you speak of. But first, we're going to talk about a podcast that a bunch of us have been listening to. Tila, I don't know if you've heard any of them
She
yet.
listened to a little bit with me.
Okay.
Did I?
So,
yeah, remember I played a little bit of it?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
That's right.
you liked it.
The podcast is done by Commonplace Books, and it is called Welcome to Night Vale.
Yep.
And it is best described, I think our friend Jason Murphy described it as Rod Serling's Lake Wobegon days, or whatever that one is.
It is. I've heard.
It also has a little bit of a Twin Peaks element to
Yeah,
it.
it's conspiracies and Cthulhu-esque elements and that kind of thing.
It is a comedic podcast about a small desert town called Night Vale, in which all sorts of like Lovecraftian conspiracies, things that go bump in the night, and strange and UFO abductions are all regular everyday occurrences, and this is like their daily news bulletin.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's all told through the voice of one character.
Yes, Cecil is the name of the lead character, and he basically is sort of an Ira Glass type for those of you in This American Life. He's basically just reading out the news on the radio and acting like it is no big deal at all that,
Right, there's been a pterodactyl invasion or something like that.
There's the school board is actually... the school board meeting is interrupted by a portal in which pteranodons come out and fly through and kill a bunch of people.
And don't think or look at the dog park.
The dog park.
There is no dog park.
There's a bunch of funny characters. There's the Apache tracker.
That's right. Who is a Caucasian guy who crudely dresses as if he were Native American, and wears a full headdress, and is always. It's funny. The host is very sort of relaxed and dry, but he occasionally snarks, and he is he judges the Apache tracker.
Yes, and he's also in love with Carlos, the handsome scientist who has come to town to look at all this weird phenomena.
That's right.
But yeah, every episode is about half an hour. They have a segment they call The Weather, which is always a band that they play music from, and it's some
like
stuff.
Independent, unsigned band.
Yeah, it's great.
And I've heard a wide variety of stuff in there. I always enjoy it. It's like they've done everything from sort of like I would say indie pop to like I've heard weird hip hop. There was a hip hop song. There was instrumental. Stuff that I would like sort of put in that kind of Nick Cave kind of category.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Dark ballads and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I think Dave, you were the first of us to listen to it. I think,
and I have to credit one of our customers with that because he told Nick and Nick told me, and that was Nathan Killian. Yep. So thank you, Nathan Killian, for tipping the first domino. I looked into it and I saw that I was like, oh, this is apparently a thing. It was when I looked it up on Wikipedia, I saw that it was the most downloaded podcast for that month, like on all of iTunes.
Yep.
And so, if you haven't heard of it before, you will soon be hearing a lot about it.
Yeah, apparently there was a lot of cosplay of it at WonderCon or one of the recent cons.
What would they be cosplaying?
Apache Tracker, Cecil,
it's kind of awesome because it's a radio show, though. There's no visuals necessarily associated with it.
I think one of the things that draws me most to it is not only the humor. The humor is great.
It's really fun.
But it's the sense of continuity that the show actually has and starts building. Because, it is just a broadcast and, talking about a town. But, they mentioned something in the first one that they'll go back to in the fourth or fifth one, and you get this sort of broad sense of just a really cool town.
Yeah, well, and they also, the way he introduces stuff is great. One of my favorite early on, it might be first or second episode, when he's talking about, he's like, a man was arrested for drunken disorder, or someone was arrested for drunken disorderly, and he's laying it out like it's a standard sort of thing. He's like, he is described as a 5-headed, 18-foot-long dragon.
Yes.
And he just kind of drops that in there, and then, there's...
And then several podcasts later, this character recurs.
Yeah, but everything is, nothing's taken for granted. I mean, it's small stuff. You get dragons, you get, like you said, pteranodons.
There's the civilization that lives underneath the bowling alley.
Yep. And the rival town of Desert Bluff.
Who he's always... It's very much like the Parks and Rec, the way that Leslie talks about the town next door. This name I forget. But
he kind of has a passive-aggressive or outright aggressive.
It's aggressive. He's like, Desert Bluffs is terrible. And
I think it's just the whole town has that sort of aggressiveness.
In the first episode, he mentions Desert Bluffs teleporting a full jetliner into their gym to try and upset their high school football team or basketball team. But, you mentioned that continuity, Nick, and when I first started listening to it, I was hoping it would actually be a little more creepy and a little less funny.
Yeah.
And so, like, I listened to about 10 minutes of it, and it didn't take for me. And so I mentioned this to people who might try it out and not quite give it a full chance. It was really only when I finished listening to the full episode and then listened also to some of the second one that I really fell into it.
Yeah, I feel like you got to go in knowing A, there's a comedic bent to it, and B, it's sort of worth giving it a few episodes. I loved it right from the outset, but I'd had several people tell me sort of what to expect.
Yeah, and
it gets under your skin. It really does.
The narrator is great.
Yeah.
He is the key to it. He's got a great voice. A very funny, dry sense of humor. I mean, but his delivery is fantastic.
Yeah.
And they've really gone out, they've made T-shirts. They've done...
Yep. If you like it, there's merchandise. I
merchandise.
own some of said merchandise.
I think some fans... Didn't they make a map of the town?
Yeah.
That sounds right.
IO9 posted it. There's a map that has, like, it has the dog park. It has the... oh shoot! I'm the
hole in the back of the Ralphs. I mean, there's that.
Yeah,
there's enough. There's enough sense of place that you could definitely put a map together.
But I mean, you don't want her to read it like right off because you'll get spoiled on some stuff.
No, listen first.
Right. It also had among other things, there was a roving pack of libertarian dogs spraying libertarian graffiti all over the city, which people couldn't help but admire for its quality.
Yeah.
I mean, that is typical of the weirdness of the show.
Yeah. Also, it's 34 episodes in as we record this. It's every other Monday they do an episode.
Yep.
So.
And it's a brisk half-hour podcast.
Yep.
So
It's a quick listen.
I believe everybody I know who's tried it has ended up liking it.
Yeah, I think but between all of us, we put so many people onto it. I've got all kinds of friends. I went out to dinner about a week ago and asked a bunch of people, I'm like, so everybody's listening to this, right? And they're like, yeah. So like, everybody I know is listening to this podcast,
So now it's all mainstream. I don't want to listen to it.
Definitely worth checking out, and it's free.
Yep.
So welcome to Night Vale. Now we're going to talk about books. Tila, books.
I feel like we should be playing classical music as we enter this, like some Bocelli or something.
Yeah, can you just play some of that Masterpiece Theater? It's
possible.
Kind of
See, you're doing it right now, Dave.
There we go. Just do that.
I don't think they're going to want to hear that.
Yeah.
No. So tell us of these books.
Without pictures?
You have been reading Kurt Vonnegut.
I have been, yes.
And I have never read any Kurt Vonnegut, which is
I don't think
a
I
shame
have.
upon me.
I don't think I have either.
It's awesome.
I think I've read Slaughterhouse-5. And,
that one's
is that the one?
Yeah.
What have you been reading?
I read Cat's Cradle and Slaughterhouse-5, and both of them, and I'm halfway through The Sirens of Titan, and both of them are Cat's Cradle and Slaughterhouse-5 are completely ridiculous. I mean, all his books are completely ridiculous.
Now, when you say ridiculous, it's like a slyly funny kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
I wouldn't call it completely like a Dadaist book, the way that Hitchhiker's Guide is, but...
it's not over the top.
You say Dadaist?
I did, yeah, breaking out the big words here.
So absurdist for those of you in listening audience.
But this is about books.
It's not quite Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but it rides that line for sure.
Okay.
So, which is most people don't think because it's a literary book. It's also an anti-war book. All of his books are anti-war books.
Let's jump to one and tell us the plot.
Yeah, I know Slaughterhouse-5, of course, but what is Cat's Cradle about?
Cat's Cradle is about a guy who's writing a book, and he interviews this family whose father was one of the people who worked on the atomic bomb. And that
is funny.
I'm just thinking about the plot, and it's hilarious. But so it's kind of has like this more serious tone at the very beginning with a little bit of humor. There's some pretty great quotes at the very beginning of the book. And then they introduce something called Ice 9, which is something the dad was working on, which is
It's like an experimental...
Yes, what it was made for was for the military to put in puddles that freeze, so when they go over like slushy terrain or swamps, it'll freeze the entire... and they can get over faster. Well, of course, as every project does, it goes awry a little bit, and the father tests it on himself, and it freezes water, and humans are 70% water, so the dad freezes himself.
Well, that's not a good idea.
And so...
Now, is this played as, grim and macabre,
no,
or is it,
completely ridiculous. So every kid has a piece of this little Ice 9 that they carry around, all the children. And, of course...
Why do they carry it around?
It's to keep it secret, so that it's safe. And, is it secret? Is it safe? Kind of like the One Ring, but a little different. Of course, they end up going to an island, and all three kids are on the island together, and things happen. The Ice 9 gets out, and the apocalypse happens because they freeze the entirety of the ocean. Okay. All the oceans freeze. So then it becomes, it's a very ridiculous book, and it's not something I expected from Vonnegut at all.
Right, like I don't have a great sense of what to expect from either. Didn't you say that it would be, you would maybe liken the tone to something like Catch-22?
Yes, definitely that same humor. Definitely the same humor.
Yeah.
So for people who kind of scathing, right?
A little bit.
Is it critical of people? Is it nihilistic?
No, it's just absurd. Like it's an anti-war book, so he's, talking about how war is bad and this is what it does to people, but it's also, it's just completely ridiculous.
And so would you say you laughed often while reading it?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
All right. Nick, what have you been reading?
I've actually been more on a science fiction bent, and I've been reading a book called Leviathan. I've finished Leviathan Wakes, which is sort of a space opera book, not unlike something like Mass Effect. Like, the world has become so large, we've actually moved into other galaxies and sort of mining and all this other stuff. And
big sci-fi,
big sci-fi stuff. And it is like a 3-book series. The second one is called Caliban's War, but it's sort of like First Contact. We've never seen anything alien-like, but we've explored into the unknown, and this is sort of about the first time we come in contact with something we can't classify or we don't know. And it's interesting, because religious sects, spring up, and...
Did you say religious sects?
Sects.
Okay.
Different.
Just checking.
Different.
Not
religious sect springs up. Woo!
Oh, that too. No, but, and sort of how they handle that, and, of course, want to bring about part of the end of the world, or, merge with the alien culture. It's just an interesting, really look at sort of that, I was playing Mass Effect at the same time, so it was kind of a nice cross, pathway for both of them, so...
Do you know who the author is?
That I should tell you, but it's James A. Corey.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is quite.
That's my boy.
He's your boy? All right. What about you, Randy? What have you been reading?
I'm going to go last. Dave, what books have you read?
My book list. Okay, so during Halloween, I read Stephen King's Misery, which is one of the ones I hadn't read. Like a lot of folks, I read a lot of Stephen King maybe when I was younger.
Yeah.
I fell off, but I still like to occasionally go back and read some Stephen King.
Okay.
Misery, very much, the movie was pretty faithful. It kept a lot of the big stuff in it. But the one thing I found in it that was not in the movie that I enjoyed was getting right inside the author's head and seeing the notions of when he first starts, he's forced to write this book for his crazed favorite fan.
Sure.
I'm your biggest fan. And when he first starts it in the... this does happen in the movie. She's not happy with the way she brings back Misery Chastain, and she gets mad at him, and, dangerously so. Well, in the book, he gets mad at himself, too. It's because he realizes he kind of gave it a half-assed effort. And it's very much... You get a lot more of, insight into, I think, Stephen King and what it means to be a writer, the tricks he used to get people to keep reading, And also, what happens when you don't give it your all? When you're doing a lesser piece of work.
Right.
And there is some sense that she has, in writing this, forcing him to write something good, that he kind of feels like, I think in the end, he might have written his best book because of what she did, which is a pretty twisted notion.
That's a different thing from the movie, because the movie, she's a hack.
He is just dragging it along to keep her, entertained until he can figure out a way to escape.
See, I think that's one of the things that books do well. Every medium has its strengths for stories, but books are one of the few places you can really get into characters' heads. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to do that in movies and TV and even in comics.
Have internal monologues,
but it's not the same.
It's not quite the same. You can go on at length for a book in pages of just in somebody's head, and it can be completely interesting and enthralling. It's tougher to do in a comic because then suddenly you're just in these text-heavy lands, unless there's a really good visual accompaniment of some sort.
Yeah, I think in general the books are best at sort of, if you want to get in someone's
sort
head.
of introspective stuff,
first person narratives and that kind of thing. Yeah,
I will also mention another book I've been reading is Pillars of the Earth, which it's a historical sort of medieval historical thing, pretty well known. I'd sort of liken it to a what's the big Western miniseries? I suddenly can't say the name.
Silverado?
No, miniseries that ran on TV.
Lonesome Dove?
Lonesome Dove. but a medieval type thing like that. But a long running tapestry. It runs for several years on end, or maybe even a decade or two.
Okay,
and it covers a bunch of characters whose lives end up intertwined in the building of this massive cathedral, which is a very complicated thing. Where there's years where nothing is happening because there's a civil war and fortunes rise and fall. There's sex and violence in this. I would also liken it to the Game of Thrones books in that sense. I'm not quite done with it, but liking it quite a bit. Okay. It is a little long, but it's good stuff. Very compelling. At no point does it become a dry exercise.
Is that Ken Follett writing?
Yep, I assume that's how you say his name, unless it's Follett.
I think it's Follett.
Let's go with Follett because we're Americans.
Why not?
Ken Follett. Anyway, so that's the main stuff I've been reading. Okay. I started reading also the podcast and advice columnist Dan Savage. I started reading his new book, American Savage, but I haven't read enough to really remark on, other than to say it's entertaining so far. If you don't listen to his podcast on sex and relationships, it's great stuff. I super recommend it. He also does a print column online, but I really like the podcast a lot better.
Yeah,
he is a super funny guy.
Yep.
But I will give the book a general recommendation, nevertheless.
Yeah, I've read. I haven't read that one.
Yeah,
but
you've read the one about his adopting
all
his
the other
kid.
ones. I read the one about him adopting his kid, which is just called The Kid, I believe. I've read the one he did follow up to that. I haven't read his sex advice columns books put together. But I've read the ones.
He just compile the columns?
He just compiles them. I've read The Kid, and I've read one of the other ones that he did. But I actually find Dan Savage most interesting when he's not talking about sex.
It's interesting
because the sex column stuff is interesting and it's fun. But when he talked on This American Life about his son and his son's views on gay marriage, because he's a young kid, that was a really great story. So I kind of like Dan Savage as a political and sociological.
I get that. He is a compelling speaker, sort of in any context.
I am really bad about books. Every year I make the resolution, I'm going to read more books this year. And every year I get to the end of the year and I've read one or two. So I have a stack of books that I've read. I've got more.
I've known you for a long time, Randy, and I know you will occasionally go through bursts where you go through quite a bit.
Yeah. I haven't been on one of those bursts in a while. The last book I read was one of the last Queen and Country novels. Queen and Country was a comic series about a British spy named Tara Chase written by Greg Rucka. That transitioned out of graphic novels into novels when he sort of started finishing her stories. And the last one I read was called Gentleman's Game, and it takes place in, it's one of the Eastern European countries.
Sure.
But
let's say Eastern Europa.
Sure, Eastern Europa. Actually, it's the country that my friend Paul lived in for a while his wife was working for the ambassadorship there. It's Uzbekistan.
There we go.
It takes place in Uzbekistan, and it's interesting. It's pretty dark. It's good action-packed spy stuff.
Is pretty dark.
Yeah. He actually does sort of realistic. I mean, he does the politics of spying and that kind of thing. It's not
the behind-the-scenes stuff.
It's not James Bondy, but he does do car chasing, gunfights, and all that kind of stuff too.
You do say dark, but I never found it extremely too dark.
This one's got some pretty dark stuff in it.
Does it?
Yeah,
okay.
Some bad things happen to the good people in that.
And there's always really tough moral choices where there's no good choice.
Right,
very realistic.
Some mission team will get left hung out to dry and will get just slaughtered or tortured to death, or who knows what.
I never wanted to throw the books across because I read the same books. I read Gentleman's Game, I read the other one, and I liked.
Well, there's 4 of them.
Oh, there's 4 of them.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm behind.
And for our readership, for our audience who come to the store, of course we recommend the comics.
Yeah, the comics are great. I actually really like
so much better than the books. So much more readable. So much more available at Rogues Gallery.
They have pictures in them.
That's right. They are not like these books.
And we're going to close out with discussion of a graphic novel, not a book.
That's right.
A hardcover that we've all been anxiously awaiting since the series came out from Dark Horse. It's called The Black Beetle, in No Way Out, and it's by Francesco Francavilla, who is a writer-artist who I think we're all big fans of.
Yes.
Who you may know from our previous discussion of Afterlife with Archie.
Yeah. He has also been doing lots of covers for Marvel, and maybe has he done for DC as well, or is he
mostly Marvel, and also some Dark Horse and some Dynamite, I think. Yeah, basically, if you bought a comic from Marvel in the last year, you probably have at least one Francavilla cover.
Yes,
but the Black Beetle is sort of a noir pulp, tale of a shadowist.
Shadow-esque character, yeah. If you know the Rocketeer or the Shadow or Doc Savage, it's from that family.
Yeah.
And
he's an original character.
It's an original character.
But it is a period piece. It takes place in like the 30s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a made-up city.
Actually, I think 40s because I saw him fighting Nazis in it.
40s, you're right. There's Nazis.
And I think, like the Rocketeer, it's a sincere piece. It is not a let's do a retro or piece or let's do it. Well, I guess it is retro, but
it's not ironic. It's not a spoof. It's a straightforward love of these characters kind of thing.
About this, what I liked is that it felt like a pulp hero procedural.
Yeah,
like you see in a way. I feel like I haven't seen since maybe the Golden Age Sandman stuff from Sandman Mystery Theater in the 90s.
Yeah,
you see him out there. He's investigating. He's crawling on rooftops. He's got that listening devices that he's taking notes on, and he's crashing mob meetings and kicking ass too.
It's interesting because there's not a ton of character to the Black Beetle.
Right.
He's sort of just a pulp guy.
He's a mystery. I don't think we.
Yeah. And it was interesting in Darwin Cook's introduction. He was like, this book is all about the action. And it really, really is. It's sort of, the action is the thing that moves it forward.
If you occasionally have read some other pulp stuff and thought that it was a little too slow and investigative, know that this guy is going to punch some people on the jaw. He's going to fly around in then he have this gyrocopter or helicopter or something like that.
It is moving at a breakneck pace, not to the point where you're like, okay, I can't get into this.
Right. But I mean, it definitely has a story.
It does.
He himself as a character is not super detailed.
No, but you don't need it. You just need to see this guy kicking ass.
He's in a way like a pulp James Bond.
Yeah.
In the sense that James Bond does not generally have a deep character, but you're like, I love James Bond.
Yeah.
Yes.
Black Beetle's a badass of the James Bond caliber.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. Not the Craig Daniel, more nuanced James Bond that we've been getting. Daniel Craig. Yeah, Daniel Craig.
You're thinking more Roger Moore.
Yeah.
You know what else is cool about this hardcover? It has a ton of supplementary material in the back.
It's a gorgeous production.
Like Francesco did all these cool fake lobby cards, and they have stuff that has some of the many quotes from various comics professionals who've all stepped up to say, we love this.
Yep.
But he did different, art for it, like they were all movie, 1940s lobby cards, and there's sketches and character designs, and probably, I don't know if there's script stuff as well. I can't remember.
A little bit, I think. Yeah, it's a really nice hardcover.
You're going to get your money's worth on this one.
I think we're all big fans. This is definitely one of my graphic novels of the year. Yes. I mean, this is one of my favorite books of the year.
I would agree.
Beautiful.
There's a new miniseries coming out soon, so
it was kind of nice to have something that was not in any way even remotely pretentious. That was just a good action adventure, good time.
Yeah,
it's a celebration of action and fun, and I like that.
All right, that about wraps it up for this time. We will close out with our traditional
Yo Joe.